Wherever you are, if you're watching, feel free to close your eyes. If you're listening, don't do this while you're driving. Maybe pull over, and once you get to your destination, you can do this. Hey, Conscious Crew. Welcome back to the Conscious Creative Corner. I am your host, Sia, the Transparent Therapist. And today we're going to be talking about transitions. I know that transitions can be super hard and a lot of people don't really like talking about it, but I think it's important for us to kind of join together and understand and uncover some tips that we can use in order to make transitions a little bit easier. Whether it's starting a new job, getting married, maybe breaking up with your partner, transitions can take a huge toll on the body. And it's really important for us to understand just how we can come up and rise up from anything that occurs that separates us from our normal routine. Today, we have some practical tips on how to navigate through these transitions with grace and resilience. Transitions for some people can feel like a plot twist in a really juicy movie. At first, everything is going great. We're in love. This job is paying me great. I love the home. Next thing you know, your life is turning upside down. You ain't making enough money. You got workplace beef. Your friends are betraying you. These kind of transitions really do take a toll on the body. One of the things that I like to tell my clients is your body keeps a score. There's an amazing book on Amazon, and I'll link it below, or for our audio listeners, look in the show notes, where you'll be able to read this book that really keeps you grounded, and it helps you understand how your body maintains distress. Sometimes distress becomes too painful and then it transitions into trauma. A lot of us are dealing with traumas, which are big T or little t traumas, which I'll talk about in another episode, but the book does explain that as well. And we overlook it so much so that our body is like, give me the capiz, give me some rest, something. But you're ignoring all those signs because you're thinking like, hey, this is my normal, but it's not. You're just going through a transition, and this transition might be traumatic. So from a clinical perspective, I just want to give you some insight on how transitions can affect your body. Firstly, when we're going through transitions, our bodies are experiencing a lot of stress. We know that when we stress, hormonal changes can occur. A transition like a pregnancy, for example, the body's undergoing a dramatic change, right? So a lot of our levels might be off. This is when we'll call in for support. Developmentally, our body's going to look a little bit different too, just so that it can prepare for childbirth. These hormonal shifts can spike our mood, increase our anxiety, and our body's feeling all of it, is absorbing all of it. Our energy levels, our appetite, even our physical appearances or physical symptoms like ailments in our body might start to occur. And you're like, hold on, what's going on here? These are hormonal shifts. Pregnancies are one of the ones that are more recognized versus others that are bigger transitions. Outside of pregnancy, there are other hormonal shifts that can occur too. When we're angry, our cortisol levels do rise along with other levels, which can make your body feel really weighted down. It can make your body feel tired. It can also do the opposite with making your body feel more elevated. And we can call that like a manic episode. And it's not necessarily just when you're angry. Manic episodes can happen when you have other diagnoses that a doctor, prescriber, or a physician like myself or clinician like myself can give you. Now, as a caveat, I'm not one of those clinicians who are like, hey, you have this diagnosis, so you have to have all these things on the list. I'm more of like a symptom, I'm more symptom focused. So if someone comes into my office and I'm speaking with them, they're like, okay, so what do I have? And I'm just like, it doesn't really matter what you have. What we're trying to treat is the symptom. And if the symptom is I'm having major hormonal changes because XYZ is happening in my life, then we'll look at that. Something else that can happen as a physical indicator that you're going through stress or a transition is actually physical stress. Sometimes you can wake up you're like, yo, I'm not really feeling it today. Today's just not doing it for me. And you're like, I don't know what happened. I got enough sleep. This could be a sign that you're going through a transition. It might not be a recognized transition like pregnancy, but it could be something like me and my homegirl or my homeboy, we're fighting right now. We're not seeing eye to eye. And then your body can be internalizing all of that. It's super important for us to recognize and listen to our body, because it's our bodies really needs to be listened to. It speaks to us. Again, I'm going to keep referring back to the book called The Body Keeps a Score, because it's an amazing book. It breaks down everything you need to know about how our body reacts. Side note, have you ever gone to a doctor, or just think about the last time you've gone to a doctor and you had to get a shot? Some people are okay with needles, but if you're thinking back to when you were a child, you're going to the doctor and you're just really ruminating on the fact like, oh my gosh, am I going to get a shot today? Am I going to get a shot today? You go into the doctor's office, your body starts tensing up. What's happening? There's no needle in sight, but your body remembers the distress it went through when it got a shot the last time. That's the way in which your body is holding on to distress. But for some, it can look like trauma if something else has happened. So it's just a way for us to keep in mind that our bodies, they tell us a lot. We just have to listen to it. Another clinical implication of a transition can be our immune functioning. Some of you guys know, and some of you guys don't. I had some health issues, or I'm still undergoing health issues, and I'm at the point in my life where I am transparent enough to explain to people that I've been going through a lot of immune difficulties. One of the things that my doctor did say was just like, hey, you have XYZ going on. We can see that, and we have the data to prove that stress highly links to immune functioning. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, guys. I was stressed, okay? And so I felt my body, and my body actually physically was doing things it didn't usually do. And it was scary for me. Our immune system is adaptive and it can tolerate stress. But when we aren't necessarily recognizing that we're stressed and we're not doing anything about it, our immune system might do something that is counterproductive, right? So maybe your levels might be off when you do blood work. You might get sick more frequently. Things might shut down more frequently. You might have excessive weight gain or weight loss. These are all things that are immune functionings that are impacted when we go through transitions. So something else to note is sleep patterns. Our bodies, if you're not treating your stress or the transition appropriately, your sleep will be off. You might either sleep too much or you might sleep too little, right? Think about your nutritional needs. Life transitions often influence nutritional needs. Maybe you're eating a little bit more. Maybe you're not something enough to eat, right? And you're like, oh, I don't usually eat this. That was me, but I'm eating it now. That was me, right? I was so stressed going through this transition where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to eat these things that I don't really like eating, but it was a way for me to control things I didn't have control over. And one of the last things I will mention as a clinical implication is just your cardiovascular health. This can significantly impact your mental health, which in turn can physically impact how you go about things. Pregnancy is one of those things that really do trigger your cardiovascular health. Breakups, that's another. Let me think. Anxiety, any kind of PTSD, traumatic stress, anything distressing, all those things can impact your cardiovascular health. Our hearts are so important. So we need to take care of ourselves. If we know that we're going to go through a major transition or we're experiencing one that we didn't really know about, it's super important for us to even acknowledge like, hey, I'm going through this. Let me go get me some help. So as you're hearing, transitions can be multifaceted. We really need to take the time out to understand how it affects our body, the encompassing physiological effects, hormonal, immuno, heart, psychological, all those things. As a mom, myself, I vividly remember the whirlwind when I had two and I was pregnant with my third. There was a whirlwind of emotions, um, a lot of challenges because I was trying to be a great mother and show up for my other two while still trying to reduce the stress I was feeling as my third, she was growing in my fetus. I wanted to make sure I was always keeping a track of the other two's milestones and the changes, but it became so much for me. This isn't what I was talking about earlier, but just as an example of transitioning into motherhood for a third time, it felt overwhelming, right? Where it was just like, oh, all these things are happening and I'm trying to stay abreast of it, even kind of thinking about the fact that, wow, I'm going to be a mother of three soon. Life threw another curveball, right? And I found myself like straying away from who I was, which I talk about in the first episode of season 2, where it's just like, or is it season 3? One of those where I just talking about I was in my hush season or my hush period. And I was just like, I need to calm down. I need to find myself. I need to just be quiet and quiet my thoughts a little bit more as I'm going through this transition. I'll be honest, though I had a great support system, it felt really lonely sometimes because I was the only one experiencing the pregnancy. Everyone could see what was happening, but no one could feel. My body, though, felt this transition of being pregnant a third time. Though the body kind of knows what to do because this isn't your first rodeo, she as in my body, she was still feeling it because my third pregnancy brought me different physical, I guess, challenges in that pregnancy that I was just like, I did not feel these things in the first two. Though I will say it was the easiest, some of the new symptoms I developed, it was an adjustment for. So for example, I had something called sciatica. Never had that in my other two pregnancies. And I think that's the only thing that I had in my third, but it made it really difficult because again, I had two other kids. And if you know anything about sciatica, moving around can be really hard. Really, really hard. So here I am chasing after my 1-year-old and my 2-year-old while still being pregnant with my third. And it wasn't fun, y'all. But something that really got me through was doing some of the techniques that I learned while I was a therapist, while I am a therapist. One of the things I did while I was pregnant was I learned a little bit more about trauma and then became trauma certified and practice something called EMDR. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a wonderful tool. Wonderful, wonderful tool. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but I would encourage you guys, if you're listening, to go ahead and do a Google search on EMDR and finding EMDR therapist. If you've undergone any trauma, or even if it's simple distresses that you're carrying for too long, because out of all the other trauma therapies that I am certified in, this one has changed not just my patient's life, but my life as well, because the tools are amazing. I use tools that help me acknowledge the fears, my underlying subconscious fears and anxieties that come with each new phase in my life, especially with parenthood. One tool in particular that I can share with you guys that resonated with me was the container. It's something that I do in the beginning of sessions whenever I am hosting a trauma session with one of my clients. And it's a simple tool that helps us ground before a session. Now, as much as I would love to give the whole entire spiel of EMDR to you guys, it's important that I say that EMDR is not something to be taken lightly. It's far beyond talk therapy. You should definitely do EMDR with a certified therapist because not everyone is certified. And it's one of those things that if done incorrectly, if somebody zips you down, you're not going to be zipped back up, and it can really screw with you because what's happening is we're crossing your left and right hemispheres to help reprocess maladaptive stressors or thoughts that weren't processed properly. I know I said a lot. So really quickly, let me explain. Let's say you get into a car accident. In this car accident, you never really process it. And you start to believe like, oh man, every time I get into this Subaru or whatever car, I'm going to have an accident. What this tells me is you went through this accident that information was maladaptively or incorrectly stored, and you put it on, let's say, a shelf that doesn't make sense, right? So now every time you get into a car, or every time you go onto School Street, you're like, oh man, I can't go onto School Street. You are activating that part of your brain that has improperly stored that information. Now, what we do in EMDR or in that trauma therapy is we're pulling that with corrective measures and putting it into a proper space, so that now whenever you go into School Street or you get into the car, your body is not feeling the stress or reliving the trauma that you've gone through when you got into that prior accident. There's a lot of science behind it, but technically it's interactive therapy where we're crossing the left and right hemispheres with different forms of tapping. So like butterfly tapping, things like that, because we want to cross that hemisphere in your body to properly put the information into its adaptive place. A lot of words there. But in this exercise called the container exercise, we are simply helping you ground. So I'm going to invite you guys to do this exercise with me right now. Wherever you are, if you're watching, feel free to close your eyes. If you're listening, don't do this while you're driving. Maybe pull over, and once you get to your destination, you can do this. But just going to invite you to close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, I want you to get comfortable. And I want you to imagine a container. Visualize what this container looks like. Visualize the color. Visualize the shape. Is it something hard? Is it a flexible container? And as you're visualizing the container, I want you to notice how it feels. Is it smooth? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it malleable? And as you have this container pulled up in your mind, think about if it has a lid. Sometimes it's helpful for a container to have a lid, because if it has a lid, it can be closed and store anything in there appropriately. Once you have the vision of the container in your mind, I want you to think about your past week. Have you had anything really hard happen to you? Or maybe something that's really unsolved that you truly need help with? As you think about these things, I want you to take the container, open it if it has a lid, and start to put all these stressful things into the container. Anything that caused you stress that you cannot fix right now, put all those things into the container. Take your time and think. Is there any ailments or discomfort that you're feeling in your body? If there is, invite yourself to remove that discomfort and contain it. Now, the container is there not to put anything off or dismiss, but it's just to save for a later time. This way we can be more productive at work. We can be more productive in parenthood, in our friendships, being a child, an adult child. Utilize your container to store those things. Now I'm going to invite you to do a body scan one more time. And as you do your body scan, see if there's anything else coming up for you. If nothing comes up, feel free to close the container. If you feel any other discomfort, take that away, put it into the container, and then close it. Then I'm going to invite you to put your container into a safe place where you know you can access it at any time. But for right now, we're going to store it. So go ahead, put your container somewhere safe and turn away from it. And for my audio listeners, feel free to open your eyes, continue on to your journey. And for my visual listeners, you can open your eyes as well. How did that feel for y'all? Hopefully it felt good. Hopefully it felt like you feel a little lighter. Your body feels that it can kind of shed whatever it needs to shed. This is a great way to compartmentalize your stress. I use it all the time because as a couples therapist or just a trauma therapist, it can be really hard taking on a lot of people's traumas and things in the room. So I like to compartmentalize it before I move to my next patient. Or I like to compartmentalize work before I go and take care of my kids. I enjoy it. So I hope this was really helpful for you. So as I said, whether you are navigating a hard breakup, whether you're moving into a new home or getting a new job, it's important for us to recognize when our body is going through some difficulties or transitional periods, because it can impact our immune, our hormones, our cardiovascular system, our mental health. All these things can be impacted. And if we ignore it thinking like, oh, it'll get better over time, it might not unless you're proactive. And I don't want you guys to think that transitions are bad, right? Because they're not. Life in itself is a transition. It's a journey. And as we're going through it, we're growing and we're learning a little bit more about ourselves. So give yourself that space to have an opportunity to go through a transition, but just do it appropriately and in a supported manner. All right, guys. So that's pretty much it. That wraps up this podcast. Again, I am Sia, the transparent therapist. If you enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and rate it on your streaming platform. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, anything you can think of where you can stream podcasts. We are there. So go ahead and leave a review. If you are on YouTube watching us, hey girl, hey, bye girl, bye. Leave a comment, thumbs up the video. Let me know what you like most about this episode because I love interacting with you guys. And walk good, keep the vibes high, and I'll see you guys next time.